something that just surprised the whole world. And if people would have known about it, it could have been stopped in place. It could have been stopped right where it came from, China. If we would have known about it, if they would have known about it.
The Chinese people do not know what is happening, and therefore, actually it's the regime that is allowing this virus to spread around.
极期的这个 SARS 那个时候呢，那相比的话呢，传染性没那么强。
我还是很难过的，这么一个好人，就最后也没挺过这一关。剩下的都是不能说的，也就不说了。
我们知道他过世之后，心情比较沉重，因为他是为我们老百姓付出的生命，我们十分感激他，我们应该向他学习。
We recognize that basing our decisions on evidence, on facts, on the best science available is going to be extremely important for keeping Canadians safe.
I think the 3.4% is really a false number. Now, this is just my hunch.
Decisions within Europe will always be made in a coordinated manner and based on scientific research.
Personally, I would say the number is way under 1%.
Our hospital systems are well prepared. We have been ready for this. Everything we expect to be happening is happening.
This came as a surprise to all of us. Just happened. It shows what can happen in life.
I think it has been an extraordinary thing to see Australians who have complied with and cooperated with the self-isolation requirements that we've put in place. We've got tens of thousands of Australians who've been subject to those.
We have thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that get better just by, sitting around and even going to work. Some of them go to work.
When you face an emergency like this, you need to remain lucid and maintain a sense of responsibility.
The Obama administration made a decision on testing that turned out to be very detrimental.
It is highly likely that we will see a growing number of UK cases.
It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
A Chinese ambassador calls for cooperation with the U.S., while a U.S. spokesperson challenges Beijing to follow through, outlining 3 steps for the regime to take. Chinese authorities have begun celebrating the so-called victory against the epidemic, but residents inside Wuhan tell a different story. A rush to produce face masks in China. Where are they being made, and how is the quality of these masks? Video conferencing software Zoom is facing a lawsuit for misleading shareholders on its privacy and encryption standards. President Trump questions whether the U.S. should continue funding the World Health Organization after the way it handled the virus pandemic.
COVID-19 is a new type of virus that we have never seen before. It takes time to discover, study, and detect. After receiving the first report of 3 or 4 suspected cases in Hubei province on December 27, 2019, the Chinese side carried out epidemiological research on December 29th, and Wuhan's Health Commission issued an emergency call 1 day later. China's National Health Commission sent experts to Wuhan on January 31st for an on-site investigation. We officially reported the situation to WHO and other countries around the world, including the United States, on January 3rd. Then China's CDC uploaded the virus gene sequence to websites on the 11th. And we ordered Wuhan to shut down on the 23rd. China has taken unprecedented, comprehensive, thorough, and strict measures to control the spread of the coronavirus. According to the World Health Organization, China's measures have greatly protected the interests of people all over the world.
The main difference between quarantine and isolation is whether the person has symptoms or not. Quarantine is applied to people who have been exposed but are not symptomatic, whereas isolation applies to people who are already exhibiting symptoms. Based on the information we have now about COVID, we suspect the longer end of the incubation period is about 14 days. So that's the duration that has been used for the quarantines that have been put in place in multiple areas. Initially, outbreaks like this usually are detected by detection of a cluster, so a group of cases of similar illness or disease. If it's not contained at that point, then it could develop into an outbreak, so an increase in cases in a certain local area. Spread beyond that could then become epidemic or within a country or a local region. And then if there's spread more widespread, so across multiple countries, continents, or around the world, then that becomes a pandemic.
An outbreak of coronavirus infections in Wuhan province of China in 2019 is threatening to emerge as the next pandemic. Current count over 81,000 cases, 3,000 plus deaths have been reported in China, with over 1 million cases, 58,000 plus deaths worldwide. The alarming speed of transition is in part because the virus spreads through the air and by touch. This is SARS-CoV-2. It belongs to the family of coronaviruses named for the crown-like spikes on their surface. SARS-CoV-2 can cause COVID-19, a contagious viral infection that attacks primarily your throat and your lungs. According to the World Health Organization China Joint Mission on COVID-19, as of February 20th, 80% of laboratory-confirmed cases were mild to moderate. 14% were severe, and 6% were critical. Just to be clear, a mild case of COVID-19 is not like a mild cold. Severe cases do need supplementary oxygen. Anything less than needing oxygen puts you in this category. The symptoms, treatments, and timelines of having the disease vary. So let's break down what having COVID-19 looks like day to day for each level of severity. It can take as few as 2 or as many as 14 days after being exposed to the novel coronavirus for the first symptom to develop.
And once it enters into the body, many different things happen. And this is not unique to COVID-19, but it's kind of across the board of all viruses, where initially the virus can cause some damage locally to where it enters. And so if that's your nose, you may notice some symptoms such as a runny nose or a stuffy nose, or you may sneeze more frequently than usual. And over time, that virus may stop there or may continue down the respiratory tract and can enter into the lungs, where it can cause issues such as coughing.
This is when it might feel like a cold or the common flu.
Influenza is a specific type of infection caused by a specific virus. So that's usually an influenza A or influenza B virus. The cold, on the other hand, is caused by hundreds of different types of viruses. The main difference that you would notice is that influenza tends to cause what we call more systemic symptoms. So you are more likely to have fever, body aches and pains than you are with the cold, which tends to be usually just runny nose, sore throat, and possibly some cough. The best things that we recommend for people who have the common cold are to get plenty of rest, to drink plenty of fluids, and you can use kind of symptomatic relief methods in terms of ibuprofen or acetaminophen to help yourself feel better until your body's able to fight it off itself. Once you have a viral infection of any kind, there is an increased chance that you might develop a superimposed bacterial infection. So this can look like a few different things. Ear infections can be an example of that. Your risk of developing a bacterial sinusitis could go up, and your risk of developing pneumonia or a lung infection can go up as well. However, most commonly, the virus just runs its course and doesn't cause any long-term issues.
The World Health Organization China Joint Mission saw that about 88% who had COVID-19 had a fever. Another study out of China showed that while only 44% of patients had a fever on admission to a hospital, 89% eventually developed one. But there have been some cases that led with gastrointestinal symptoms. Diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, and/or abdominal discomfort may appear a couple of days before respiratory symptoms. This isn't the norm, though, because COVID-19 is a respiratory disease. That means for most patients, the virus will start and end in the lungs. In the early days, the virus invades lung cells. Specifically, this can damage the cilia, the hair life projections that move around to keep airwaves clear of mucus and debris. When cells get infected, they die and shut off, adding to the debris and hindering your body's ability to keep stuff out of the lungs and trachea. Inflammation causes damage, and damage causes more inflammation. And this cycle can continue till there is no healthy tissue left. And inflammation might explain why a dry cough is one of the most common symptoms. Same goes for shortness of breath and phlegm production. Other symptoms that could appear around this time are fatigue, sore throat, headaches, joint or muscle pain, chills, and a runny nose. By day 5, patients with pre-existing conditions might find that they have trouble breathing, and it usually takes about 7 days for a person to go to a hospital. Mild cases usually clear up by this time, but those with moderate to critical cases will develop pneumonia, which can range from non-threatening to severe. Recovery time for these patients can be anywhere from a few days to weeks. For some severe and critical cases, though, symptoms can escalate into acute respiratory distress syndrome. ARDS is an illness that happens when fluid builds up in the lungs. Inflammation triggers a flood of immune cells that are meant to target the infection. They are usually isolated to targeted areas, but sometimes the body goes overboard, which is when the immune cells start killing anything in their path, including healthy cells. ARDS is often fatal in critical cases. It can lead to respiratory failure requiring advanced life support, and at this time it's most likely when the patients will head to the ICU. ARDS treatment includes supplemental oxygen and mechanical ventilation. The goal is to get more oxygen into the bloodstream since the lungs can't. When this treatment doesn't work, the lungs are basically too flooded to get oxygen into your bloodstream. That's the cause of most COVID-19 death. And even when a person survives this phase, they could be left with permanent lung damage. SARS punched holes in some infected people's lungs, giving them a honeycomb effect, and these lesions have been seen in people infected with the novel coronavirus 2. In December 2019, China notified the World Health Organization of several cases of human respiratory illness, a disease later known as COVID-19. The virus causing this disease is known as Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. Disease spreads through small droplets that are exposed through the nose or mouth when a person with COVID-19 coughs or exhales. These droplets can land on your hand and be transmitted through something as simple as a handshake. Afterwards, you touch your nose, eyes, or mouth, the so-called T-zone. The virus is known to survive on different types of surfaces, so touching these contaminated surfaces and touching your T-zone brings a high risk of infection. What we know so far, the coronavirus is spherical in shape and its genetic material is capsulated by different types of proteins. Some of the key structural ones are spike S proteins, the most prominent feature of coronaviruses from where they get their name. Then M, or membrane protein, and the so-called envelope protein. Let's have a closer look. Inside the virus, genetic material contains information to make more copies of itself. A protein shell provides a hard protective enclosure for the genetic materials as the virus travels between the people that it infects. An outer envelope allows the virus to infect cells by merging with the cell's outer membrane. Projecting from the outer envelope are spikes of protein molecules. Both a typical influenza virus and a new coronavirus use their spikes like a key to get inside a cell in your body, where it takes over the cell's internal machinery, repurposing it to build the components of new viruses. When an infected person talks, coughs, or sneezes, it may land in your mouth or nose and then move into your lungs. Once inside your body, the virus comes in contact with cells in your throat, nose, or lungs. One spike on the virus inserts into a receptor molecule on your healthy cell membrane like a key in a lock. This action allows the virus to get into your cell. A typical flu virus would travel inside a sac made from your cell's membranes to your cell's nucleus that houses all its genetic material. The coronavirus, on the other hand, doesn't need to enter the host cell nucleus. It can directly access parts of the host cell called ribosomes. Ribosomes use genetic information from the virus to make viral proteins such as the spike on the virus's surface. A packaging structure in your cell then carries the spikes in vesicles, which merge with your cell's outer layer, the cell membrane. All the parts needed to create a new virus gathered just beneath your cell's membrane. Then a new virus buds off from the cell's membrane.
Usually when someone gets pneumonia, it's one part of the lung that gets the infection. That's what pneumonia is. It's an irritation infection of the lung tissue. What we're seeing with these COVID-19 patients is the lung infection, what's happening, the inflammation to the lungs is actually all over the lung. So it's in multiple places, which is why it's so serious. And I think also why it's creating symptoms quickly. So the pneumonia that we're seeing with COVID-19 is more widespread in the lungs than what we consider traditional pneumonia.
The question about the pneumonia vaccine that we've been getting asked is, whether or not it could protect you from complications of coronavirus. It's actually not clear. The data coming out of China and even some preliminary data coming out of Italy is that the virus does attack the lungs. It causes something called ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. That is a manifestation of the virus itself. It's not like a secondary bacterial complication. Now, whether there could be secondary bacterial complications, my guess is probably. We don't have a lot of data. So certainly anybody over the age of, I think it's 65, needs to be getting their pneumonia vaccine, but that's general in respiratory season, period, not specific to the coronavirus.
Whether you would develop these symptoms depends on a lot of factors, such as your age or if you already have an existing condition. While this all sounds scary, the push to develop a coronavirus vaccine is moving at high speed.
Shares of biotech names higher today. That's after Regeneron said it's aiming to have a potential COVID-19 drug ready for clinical trials by early summer. Meg Terrell here with more. Meg.
Hi, Sarah. Well, that's about 2 months faster than the previous timeline we saw from Regeneron, so it is encouraging news. The company is saying this morning they've isolated hundreds of antibodies that neutralize the novel coronavirus. The company now sorting through those antibodies, as well as antibodies derived from people who've recovered from COVID-19, to find the best two to make a cocktail for human testing. If it's successful, the medicine could be unique in that it could both prevent the infection and treat it, but it still needs to go through clinical trials to prove it's safe safe and effective, and that will take several months. But many experts point out Regeneron's done this effectively before in an outbreak scenario for Ebola, where its drug was shown in a clinical trial in the Democratic Republic of Congo to save lives.
It's a race against time to develop a vaccine amid a pandemic. Each step in vaccine development usually takes months, if not years. An Ebola vaccine broke records by being ready in 5 years. The hope here is to develop one for the new coronavirus in a record-breaking 12 to 18 months.
The virus that causes coronavirus disease is spreading in some of our communities. This disease, also known as COVID-19, is thought to spread mainly from person to person through respiratory droplets produced when an infected person coughs or sneezes. These droplets can spread to the mouth, nose, or hands of people who are nearby or possibly be inhaled into the lungs. Take steps to lower your risk of getting sick. Here are some things you should do. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. You can also use hand sanitizer that contains at least 60% alcohol. Take extra measures to put distance between yourself and others. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Stay home if you're sick, except to get medical care. If you have severe symptoms, please call 911. Cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue or the inside of your elbow. Only wear a face mask if you're sick and around other people, or if you need to take care of someone who is sick. Clean and disinfect frequently touched surfaces. Older adults and people who have severe chronic medical conditions, like heart or lung disease or diabetes, are at higher risk for more serious illness from COVID-19. This group should consult with their healthcare provider about additional steps to stay protected. For more information on COVID-19, please visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. Let's work together to protect ourselves, our families, and our communities.